Okay, we're going to go ahead and begin. Welcome to Midwest Dairy's Consumer Insights webinar. I'm delighted that you could join us as we explore the growth opportunities that we are seeing in the milk category. I am Maureen Windish, Midwest Dairy's Senior Manager of Insights and Analytics. And as you may know, Midwest Dairy partners with a wide variety of premier market research firms. Today, I will lead the webinar along with John Lair, who is from Circana. John leads Circana's dairy category insights and works extensively with DMI and MilkPEP. He has 25 years of experience leading marketing strategy for food manufacturers, including Crystal Farms, Schwann's, and Kemp's. I invite you to ask questions in the Q&A feature. We will also be using the chat feature a bit today, so hopefully your fingers are ready for some typing. And then after the webinar, we will send you a link to the presentation as well as the recording. So you don't have to take copious notes, but do know that you will be given the presentation afterwards. Okay, so we will move on to the agenda for today. Next slide, please. Okay, so for today's agenda, we are going to initially check in with the consumer and look into the consumer's mindset and how that mindset is changing or shaping the milk trends that we are seeing. We will talk about milk segment trends, specifically looking into fat levels, value-added milk, and how size might be playing a role. We will also look at milks compared to alternative beverages, and then we'll wrap it up with some recommendations. And so, as I mentioned, we would be taking a look at the consumer mindset, specifically the drivers of consumer choice in the food and beverage landscape, and how that's changing what consumers are demanding in the milk category. So again, as I promised, we'll be using the chat a little bit today. So if you could use your chat to help or to let me know what you think is driving consumer choices in the food and beverage landscape. What are they looking for? What are driving some of the choices that they're making when they go to the shelf to make their selections? Anybody have any ideas? Taste. Low calories. Anything else that consumers are considering? Protein, healthy, affordability. Yes, 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 and yes. Next slide, please. So today, consumers are juggling quite a lot. They have quite a few things on their mind when they're making their food and beverage choices. And you have touched on some of them. Definitely enjoyment. Consumers are looking to enjoy their food. They're also hoping that it tastes, they're also hoping that it's healthy and nutritious. They're looking for affordable food items. They're looking for things that are convenient, and they're looking for things that tap into their environmental concerns or their animal welfare concerns. Sustainability is an issue for them today. And how do I know this? Next slide. I know this because we have information that you see on this slide that speaks to the top drivers of consumer choice. And you can see on the left are the top 5 drivers of consumer choice: taste, price, freshness, healthfulness, and convenience. I would call these the basic needs that consumers are looking for in their food and beverage choices. And these are like the basic needs that consumers have. Once these needs are satisfied, then they think about the next 5 drivers that are on the right. So natural ingredients, organic, local, animal welfare, and environmental sustainability. So all of these things are considered in the mindset of consumers. We are not going to touch on all of them today. We will touch on 3 of them. Specifically, we'll kick off with affordability, and we'll talk about how the dairy industry, but specifically milk, is tying into affordability. So next slide. So from an affordability perspective, how is milk tapping into this? Obviously, there's lots of ways that milk can tap into affordability. We're going to just touch on this one example here for right now, which is right sizing products. So if you go to the next slide. First of all, just to level set, about half of consumers are concerned about what they can afford. So if you look on the left and you add up all the bars, 46.8% of consumers are saying that they are either extremely worried, somewhat worried, or they're neutral in terms of their ability to afford things that they need. And on the right, we're looking at those things that they want. So in total, about 50% of consumers are saying that they really are concerned about being able to afford the things that they need and the things that they want. So it is important that we address this. And one of the ways that the dairy industry and specifically milk is tapping into this, next slide, please, is by offering different sizes. So in milk coming in a larger size with the example that we're seeing here helps consumers economize in terms of offering a larger size. And then the next slide, offering smaller sizes. So by contrast, offering smaller sizes also helps consumers lower the risk of their purchases. So if they want to try a new flavor, for example, there's a variety of new flavors here that we're seeing on the screen. These are great examples of how Prairie Farms is tapping into offering these interesting flavors and making it affordable for consumers by lowering the risk in terms of the smaller sizes that they're offering. Next slide, please. We do research in the Midwest dairy region, and so we know that by and large, consumers think that dairy is pretty affordable. 72% of consumers say that dairy is affordable for their families. That's not everybody saying that dairy is affordable. Still, almost 30% of consumers do think that dairy could be more affordable. This is a driver of purchase, and this is an area of improvement, and definitely something that we can tap into for innovation. Next slide, please. The next consumer need that I would like to touch on is health and wellness. And some of you had already pointed to high protein being a driver for consumers. And we're definitely seeing this in the milk category. We're also seeing low sugar and no sugar as another attribute to tap into. Next slide. So in terms of health and wellness, these are the top priorities for consumers. There are a list of 10 of them. So fresh, good source of protein, low in sugar, good source of nutrients, contains fruits and vegetables, low sodium, natural, limited or no artificial ingredients, minimal or no processing, and then a good source of fiber. So for each one of these, the little milk jug next to it denotes that this is a strength for milk. Certainly we know that milk is fresh. We also know it's a good source of protein. And we are seeing lower sugar options that are available to consumers. We also know it's a good source of nutrients. So really hitting on 4 of those top 5 things that consumers are looking for. Moving on. We also know from another study where the question was specifically posed, what do consumers say is the most important nutrient in a healthy food or beverage? And across generations, go ahead and click, protein was the top driver or the top selected item in terms of the nutrients that they're most seeking. So that's across all generations are looking for protein. Moving on to the next slide. So we know over the years that protein has really evolved. It really is for everyone. It really, started back in the, early 2000s or 1999 specifically, where dairy protein was founded. We mainly found it in supplements for athletes and bodybuilders. Then in 2010, it moved into science, and it was established as an effective weight management tool. And in 2012, there were discussions about that science and generated a lot of media attention. Then in 2020, there was a steady increase in successful brands normalizing protein claims in supermarkets, moving protein from sports to indulgence. to today, where we see that animal proteins has a quality advantage and it opens up opportunities for a new phase in the protein market. And this is where, milk is really able to tap into that animal protein, that quality advantage that animal proteins have. Next slide, please. So in America, not surprising, we're seeing a lot of obsession with protein. Really a lot of headlines showing up across multiple sources of media. A couple examples here. I know I was flipping through a Vogue magazine the other day, not obviously a nutrition focused magazine, and did see a 5-page spread on protein. So definitely a lot of focus on protein across the board. Next slide. So with protein being the hero of the story, every story needs a villain, and 35% of consumers are saying that healthy food is low in sugar. So a lot of consumers are staying away from sugar and trying to really minimize that in their diet. Partly that is due to weight management. 82% of adult consumers are engaged in some form of weight management. 42% of Americans over 20 years of age are living with obesity. 15% live with diabetes. 45% have hypertension. And then by 2035, 7% of individuals and 13.6% of households are projected to be using a GLP-1. So certainly a lot of health concerns that consumers are grappling with when it comes to these specific issues, and low sugar is a solution to that. Next slide. These are the health claims that we're seeing dominate the innovation in the dairy aisle. We're seeing an increase in no, less, and low sugar with a 10% growth in those products. High source of protein with a 10% growth rate in those products, and then no and reduced lactose with a 6% growth rate. And so we're definitely seeing that milk specifically is tapping into this protein story and telling the protein story in a variety of ways. This is an example from Horizon Organics, and we're looking at some information they have about protein on their website. It says the protein in milk is considered a complete protein, which means it provides all the essential amino acids at optimal levels. Protein helps support strong muscles, and milk is the #1 source of protein for American kids 2 to 18 years of age. So there is an example of how the protein story is being told in milk brands. Next slide. 34% of consumers in our region are saying that someone themselves or someone in their household is dairy sensitive. And we're also seeing that that's increasing year over year, with Gen Z reporting higher rates of lactose sensitivity. So not surprising that those lactose-free claims are really, propelling the milk category. Next slide. And tapping into consumers' needs related to sustainability, definitely seeing a connection here with milk, especially when it comes to animal welfare, environmental sustainability, and local. On the local front, 51% of consumers in the US say that a locally produced or sourced food or beverage claim is important to them. On the right, you can see an example from Cub's website where they're really tapping into this. They're saying that our milk goes from farm to the plant to Cub to you in 48 hours, really playing into that idea that the milk is not traveling very far and it's making it to their table in 48 hours. Next slide. And so brands are really milk brands are tapping into these concerns about environmental sustainability with additional claims around grass-fed, organic, and animal-friendly. So grass-fed claims have grown 133% since 2019. 8% when it comes to organic, and then 21% on and the animal friendly claims. All right, moving on to the next section. John will take it from here and talk about the total milk category trends.
Thank you, Marie, and thank you, Midwest Dairy Association and your partners for having me today. To build on some of Marine's points, the health and wellness trends we're seeing more broadly are occurring in milk in a big way. In fact, consumer trends in milk that are occurring over the last 18 months have been truly, actually remarkable. At a total category level, I think one may only experience what we've been seeing just a time or two in their career. Milk's story, I would say, is still to be written, but now we have several paths or playbooks to follow to add the momentum. Before we dig in, I just want to touch on the vernacular that's going to come quickly today. For starters, a few definitions. Total milk. Total milk is simply the combination of what we're going to call traditional milk and value-added milk. Value-added milk is any number of these things. It could be organic milk or lactose-free milk or milk with A2 or with higher protein or omega. Traditional milk is simply total milk, less value-added. Alternatives or alternative beverages, you'll hear me use those probably interchangeably today, are really the plant-based substitutes, including the flavors of almond and cashew and coconut and so forth. And volume, when we talk about milk today, will always be expressed in gallons. Okay, to set the stage, milk is a huge category and extremely important to retailers because when milk is in the cart, consumers spend almost twice as much. So we're seeing the chart on the right-hand side, or the bar on the right-hand side, where consumers are spending over $87 when milk is in the cart. In fact, while dairy is the largest dollar aisle in the store, milk is the second largest category within dairy, delivering over $18 billion. That said, it's true that milk has been on a decline over 70 years. The USDA stats show that per capita consumption has over a negative 3% CAGR or compounded annual growth rate since 1950. But look what's happening more recently. This chart shows total milk volume sold at all retail channels in the U.S. The bars are representing the volume change versus a year ago. The total volume of milk is in the bottom chart. So you can see in 2024, there was 3.5 billion gallons of milk sold. On the left of this chart, we see the negative 6.8% swing, and that's a swing from the positive COVID-related in-home trends that we had the year prior in 2020. But from 2022 to 2023, a shift begins. And in 2024 and year to date, the changes or the plateauing of those changes is really remarkable. On this chart, we simply break down the volume percent change on a monthly basis. We can see the relative improvement in 2023. Then in January of 2024, milk is positive versus prior year. And it's not just a little bit, it's by 2%. That's 5.5 million gallons of milk that month that wasn't sold the year prior. It's a good bet that no one saw that coming at the total category level. And then what could be considered a possible anomaly becomes a trend with month after month of positive or relatively very strong numbers. But not everything within milk has equal performance. On this chart, we're simply pulling apart the key segments of total milk. On the left, we see milk at, again, 3.5 billion gallons. On the far right, we have the value-added milks, which account for about 16.7% of total volume share. With a split, you can see between chocolate and white or plain milk, where chocolate value-added milk is about 7% of total value-added. I only mention that because I find often people think that value-added flavored milk or value-added chocolate milk is a much higher mix of total value-added than the traditionals, but it's not. It's a little bit higher, but not overwhelmingly so. And of course, traditional white has the lion's share of volume here at 78% of total milk volume. Now, looking at the volume changes versus a year ago, you can see over on the right, value added is certainly outpacing traditional, but traditional is much improved versus prior trends at traditional white only being down 1.5%. In this slide, we break out the components of value added. First, a note, these are not mutually exclusive segments, meaning some products may have more than one value added benefit. So you could have, as an example, there are some organic milks out there that are lactose free. That said, in the bars, we're looking at the volume change, the volume last year in millions of gallons, and the percent change is in the grouping below. The value-added segment starting from the left, let's look at organic. We start with organic and we go to lactose-free, milk with A2, milk with added omega, milk that's pre and probiotic, milk with higher protein. And just as a note, this means that it's just higher than traditional milk. And then remaining health enhanced. And remaining health enhanced is primarily calcium and vitamin A that make up that bucket. Protein and lactose-free certainly lead the way in terms of volume change and overall size. But organic is also seeing a nice rebound at being up about 1.9%. We're going to see that in another slide coming up, what kind of rebound that looks like versus where our organic has been. And a note on size. Since the last time we saw inflationary pressure, we saw significant growth in half gallons. This time around, we're not seeing that shift, suggesting that consumers are actually shifting back toward value-focused choices, as Maureen mentioned earlier. That said, it's interesting that while half gallons are about a quarter the size of gallons from a volume standpoint, there's actually more buyers, as depicted in the first row of half gallons. And on the right, you can see the huge number of buyer gains that we saw that I just mentioned in 2022 due to inflation of over 1.7 million buyers being added in that time period. So you can see there's a real shift, a real difference in what's happening this time around with inflation. This is the last slide. We're going to look at the comparison of gallons versus half gallons. But I think it's important because as you think about the generational shifts that we hear so often about, this chart shows the buyers and the volume per buyer for each generation group and the performance differences of gallons and half gallons within each. So yes, boomers make up the highest amount of volume, the highest amount of buyers of half gallons, but Gen X has the highest percent growth as shown in the green circle down below. And shifting gears. In this chart, we're comparing the major retail channels, looking at trips percentage change versus a year ago. All outlets is the total over on the left. Food, Walmart, and Club are all depicted here. Milk is in red with the refrigerated aisle in yellow and edibles in blue, just for comparison purposes. On the right, we see that milk trips have increased significantly at Club versus at food and in the Walmart channel. And in fact, milk is lagging refrigerated and edibles at food and at Walmart, as you can see in the red circles. In total, even though milk trips over on the left-hand side, even though milk trip the change is less positive than total edibles, milk is outpacing everything in dollars per trip. In this slide, we can see that a little more clearly. On this slide, we have over on the left the total food and beverage trips per buyer change, which is, again, very positive. But then on the left, we see the food and beverage dollars per trip have declined significantly in the yellow, while milk has actually increased at the same time period. So some real interesting dynamics going on between total food and what's happening just within milk. Also of note, and what suggests to be a positive signal for milk, we're seeing milk diverge from ready-to-eat cereal, where historically 25 to 30% of sales were actually correlated with ready-to-eat cereal. That pattern is very much less evident today, suggesting that there's other milk occasions that are taking a higher share of milk consumption. On this slide, we're looking at key consumer measures or behavioral measures, including household buyers or household penetration, number of buyers, trips per buyer, volume per trip. These measures are all a very good barometer of typically of a product or a category's health. And as you can see from this chart, total milk, total dairy milk looks very positive. We haven't seen these numbers in quite a while, and so this is a really exciting chart to key on. There we go. Sorry about that. Um, and again, with a shopper behavioral lens, this chart is showing the consumer drivers impacting milk volume over the last year. On the left, we start with volume last year, and we can see, and on the right-hand side, we see where volume is today. So it's relatively stable at about 3.5 billion gallons. We can see the top two contributors keeping milk volume relatively stable, were volume coming from new buyers and volume from more frequency of those buyers. And this chart is really worth taking in fully. It shows the average weekly items per store selling. This is not a velocity measure. It's rather how many items, not volume, but items are being scanned at the register. It's really a proxy for items at shelf. So let's start with the bottom in blue, in the blue band. Over the last 5 years, milk has lost an average of 6.5 items per store. The milk components separated between traditional milk and value-added milk are in blue and yellow, respectively. Looking at value-added in yellow, it lost 4 items per store over the last year, yet had a 4-year volume CAGR, or compounded annual growth rate, of 3%. Now compare that to alternatives on the top, which gained 3.5 items, but had a negative 4.1% CAGR. We'll come back to this in a few slides, but I think this is telling in terms of the dynamics that are going on and what's happening at retail. For our last view of total milk, we're looking at the basket dollars per trip on this slide. When value-added flavored and white milk are in the basket, the total basket dollars are actually 18% and 19% larger than alternative beverages, respectively. And that's numbers from the very right. Total baskets are both up for value added for white and flavored, while alternative baskets are actually down over 5%. So the $92.75 for alternative is actually down 5% for alts. As a reference point, we can see that when any milk is in the basket, the whole basket dollars are over $87. So now we'll step down into a number of segments within milk. Flavored milk, fat level, size are all segments across total milk. Again, while lactose-free, organic A2, protein, pre-probiotic, and omega are all segments within value-added. On this first slide, we're comparing milk by fat levels. Whole milk makes up 48% of the total milk by volume, as you can see in the green circle, and it's grown an incredible 2.8% in the last year, seemingly picking up strength from the already solid 1.1% momentum on a 4-year CAGR basis. And thankfully, distribution points have grown as well. The size and growth of whole fat make this segment the largest driver of total milk positive performance over the last year. We've talked about those key buyer measures and how they signal the health of a product or a category. For whole milk, we have extremely healthy increases in buyers, trips, in volume per buyer circled in the bottom. And lastly, on whole milk, we're going to look at breaking down the volume performance with the household demographics. This table shows the differences with notable demographic breaks by fat level across the top. This is a volume index table where the red is underperforming versus an average. Light green is overperforming or over-indexing, and dark green is highly over-indexing to the average. So just a few Whoops, sorry about that. Just a few notes here. First, we can see in the dark blue arrows that millennials are solidly over-indexing, which really follows from them over-indexing with households with children. On the other side, when we look at like race and ethnicity groups, all fat levels fall short, which suggests an opportunity to position milk differently. Switching to lactose-free milk versus a full lactose comparison. Lactose-free is shown on the right, and it's circled here on this chart. It has a 9% volume share, and it's had great growth over the last year. And it's been tremendous and sustained growth over 4 years. The distribution gains are decent, but need to continue to be the focus, and it's backed by solid buyer trends. So you've seen the strength of whole fat across total milk. Here on this chart, we're going to look at the fat levels and how they perform just for lactose-free. This chart is showing the volume share for each level for lactose-free. In this case, 2% leads the volume share for lactose-free. And in fact, skim 1 and 2% all lead over whole fat in terms of growth. There's a lot more to unpack here, but the only comment I'll leave for today is there's two major brands and private label, and there's two distinctively different consumer positions within this segment, driving the differences that we see with traditional milk. And here again, we're looking at the key buyer purchase measures for lactose-free. And again, we're seeing that lactose-free is incredibly healthy, growing buyers by 1.7 million households, with increases in trips and volume per trip, both up over 4%. And looking at lactose-free versus full lactose demographics, we see some real clear differences, including acculturated Hispanic ethnicity clearly leans to lactose-free with a 128 volume index versus a 63 for full lactose. That's an incredible disparity between the two. But there's no material difference when we look at lactose-free by race. But again, this is in total lactose-free. As we step this down and look at maybe a brand level as a suggestion, it does present a very different picture based on different positionings of those brands. Now, a quick view of flavored milk. Flavored milk shows, as you can see here, a total volume share of about 6%. And all flavors are underperforming plain white. Chocolate is broken out over on the far right between whole fat and reduced fat. We do this because in the past, we've seen that whole fat had much stronger performance versus reduced. But in the last year, performance is really running in parallel between reduced and whole chocolate. Here's a quick view of organic versus non-organic. Organic, again, is over on the far right and has had a solid year being up 2% in volume, which is a reverse of declines from the past few years. We can actually see the 4-year CAGR is actually down, which includes this year, which is actually down 1%. And this slide looks at what we call enhanced value-added milks. In the case of protein, we simply delineate milks that have a higher amount of protein versus traditional milk. Although in total, the volume share of these is only about 5%, almost all have very strong volume growth. And because of the larger share, our higher protein milk actually leads in total absolute volume gains here. And here in this slide, we dive into protein layering on lactose-free. The bars for each year show the total lactose-free milk. So it's total lactose-free milk for 2021 and 2025. We can see that the CAGR for lactose-free in total is 8.6% over on the right. The blue represents lactose-free without higher protein, and the yellow is lactose-free with higher protein. In 2025, we can see that lactose-free with higher protein has grown more than lactose-free without. And it has over double the CAGR of lactose-free without. at 13.4%. And looking at the demographic differences between lactose-free with higher protein versus without, we see some notable differences, including much higher volume indices for three-person households and millennials, and households with older children, and a host of distinct lifestyle groups. So there's a lot to unpack here. And for those folks looking to reposition or launch into this space, there's a lot of delayering and uncoupling that can happen here to understand opportunities. This last segment view is by single serve milk. And overall, the single serve are underperforming and they have a small share. But the point of even showing this is really the observation that there's single serve growth in competing beverages, and then that's been very strong. So there's opportunities here that are kind of right around the corner for milk and should be more fully explored. And now we're going to turn a little bit, and in this last section, we're going to look at a more direct comparison between dairy milk and alternative beverages. So to start us out, when we combine dairy milk and alts, as the consumer sees it when they go to the refrigerated case, milk has an overwhelming share, over 90% of kind of that total space and total volume. And alternative volume has been sliding since 2021. And year to date, in fact, is down over on the right. You can see it's down 6.6% versus a year ago. And opposite of what we've seen in total milk, there's some very unhealthy buyer signals in alternatives. First, buyers are down, number of buyers are down 2.3%, which is a huge decline. And trips and volume per buyer are down as well. In this chart, we're simply looking at alternatives by flavor. Almond flavor has the highest share, and it also has the largest decline within alternatives. Oat is slightly positive, but it's really cooled from its prior year growth. This slide looks at volume per buyer, comparing households that are exclusive across different options. For example, first on the top, we have households that only buy traditional and value-added milk. They don't buy any alternatives, just those two. In the second bar, as an example, we show households that only buy traditional milk. We can see in these charts that the households that buy both traditional and value-added, even when they add alternatives, which is the bottom row on the bottom, they buy the most dairy gallons per year, as you can see indicated by the circles on the right. This chart shows a quick comparison of value-added milk versus alternative in dollars. On the left, we see total value-added milk contributes $5.6 billion, which is 75% greater than alts. And on the right, value-added milk dollars grew almost $500 million in the last 52 weeks. And here it's the same look or the same comparison, but in volume, where value-added milk is 53% larger than alternatives. On the right, we see the value-added volume growing at over 6% on higher pricing, while alts are experiencing the exact opposite effect. So some notes, some recommendations, and findings to share with all. Milk is still proving it's relevant. It's relevant with consumers and it's relevant with retailers as it drives enormous dollars, over $18 billion a year. And as milk has taken a back seat for a while, there may be opportunities to assess shelving and space opportunities on assortment and mix and space to sales and basket dollars. The time is perfect for that now, as we've seen made a pretty convincing argument that the trends are certainly in favor of total milk and especially some key milk segments. Next, again, there are proven pockets of success, segments of the category, large segments that are winning with consumers. And we feel a key question is how do we fuel the fire with positioning and messaging that leverages the positive consumer sentiment that consumers are showing us right now? And although we didn't touch on it directly today, we are actively tracking at Circana how consumers' view of health is rapidly evolving. Areas we've been all talking about for a decade or more. I mean, all of us, like in the larger, CPG industry, they're finally happening and they're here now, including how food is really being seen as medicine. And there's an elevated view of health, which is a view of well-being, which includes both physical health and mental health. And milk has a strong connection to consumer wellness needs, including around food that's nutritionally dense, high quality protein, clean ingredients, it's fresh and minimal processing. These are all things that again, claims or areas we've been talking about for a long time, but we feel like they're really, really coming to roost and really finally hitting with consumers, and consumers are really looking for these attributes. And lastly, consumers are seeking benefits of value-added milk, and frankly, milk-forward functional beverages as well. And so there's opportunities to drive innovation centered on protein and digestion and energy and reducing stress. So with that, I want to thank you again for the time. If anyone wants to reach out to me directly, my contact will be in the deck that Midwest Dairy will send out. But again, appreciate your time. And Maureen, I'll turn it back over to you.
All right. Well, thank you so much, John. Obviously a lot here that milk can play into and is playing into, obviously. Any questions from those that are on the line? I'd like to open it up for questions. We did have any in the Q&A. There was one comment here from Gretchen. If you want to take a look at that, but she notes that they're seeing small brands based in Texas move into A2. So it'll be interesting to see how A2 hangs on in the future. Any other comments, questions? We do have some time left here, so no rush.
There is, I will add this, there is, we talked about kind of functional beverages, but part of the momentum that's occurring in, I'll call it functional beverages. So this is the grouping where products like Fairlife Nutrition Plan fall, or Shamrock's products, as an example, the Rockin' Protein products, and a few others that are out there in the dairy category. They are somewhat taking note, not all of them, but they're certainly leveraging protein first and foremost, number one. But there's other areas I think that people are starting to explore, where we're taking notes and taking leanings from what's happening in what we call VMS, vitamins, minerals, and supplements. And that's where, mental health, energy, digestive health, all those trends, all those solutions are starting, and some of those solutions or attempts to get to those are coming over to the food space. So it's going to be very exciting to see how milk can tap into some of those needs.
All right. Well, next slide, please. I just wanted to share my contact information, as well as several other folks on my team. Beth Upton, she is our Vice President of Research and Innovation, and she is available for questions should you have any, as well as Martha Kemper, Vice President of Dairy Experience Business Development. Feel free to reach out to us anytime, and we will try to address your future questions. Thanks so much. You guys have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Oh, there is one question.
Oh.
Catherine, I'm not sure if you're still on the line, but what, your question here, what are you hearing with the shortage of grass fed and working? John, have you heard anything? I don't know.
I have not. In terms of, is it shortage of supply?
She can't come off me.
No.
Uh,
I have not heard anything from. We track a lot of claims at Circana. Grass-fed is also up. It's very small at this point, certainly, as a number of these claims-driven attributes are. But I know it's growing. I can't speak to supply. I'm not sure where that's at, to be honest.
I will follow up with you separately, Kathy. I think I should be able to find out something for you. All right. Well, thanks again. You guys have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.